your time with us tonight as we celebrate the literary arts. We have all spent many hours online in the past several months, more than we ever imagined, I'm sure. Here at the Writers Center, we are proud that in early March, just as the pandemic was taking hold, we immediately transitioned all our programs to this virtual format successfully. One of the unforeseen benefits of going online was the tremendous interest we've seen from audiences all across the country, and in fact, the world. Since March, we've granted persons of color scholarships to nearly 50 individuals from as far away as Hawaii, India, and the UK. With us tonight are guests from approximately 24 states, including California, Michigan, North Carolina, Maine, Arizona, and Washington. We are also pleased to have with us authors from our upcoming schedule, including Rebecca, Morgan Frank, and Afa Michael Weaver, as well as so many who inspired us with their words and instruction throughout this pandemic. Fred Marchant, Susan Hodara, Amy Holman, Francis Ritchie, Danny Lawless, and Christina Chu, among others who've read and taught here lately. We would like to thank our board members, our loyal students, audience members, and Gala sponsors, Sun River Health, Swamp Press, publishers of our Slapping Hole Press chapbooks, also a sponsor, Ace Landscaping and the Green Scene, Joel Isaacson and Company, Inc., and WOW Productions. We know you have many requests for support from numerous worthy causes, especially now, this year, in this unprecedented time. By being here, you are demonstrating your continued belief in our cause, in bringing the literary arts to the public through our 4 key endeavors: readings, workshops, publishing, and community outreach. So, how can you help us? One of our greatest assets as a literary center is our building, the former Sleepy Hollow train station, a National Historic Landmark, which we restored and moved into in 1996. Contributions to our ongoing capital campaign will allow us to do the essential work of maintaining the public's of the building's historic integrity and modernizing it for technology and energy efficiency. We look forward to welcoming you all back next year in person to experience our unique space. Another aspect of our work at the Writers Center, where we welcome your support, is our recent Scholarship for Persons of Color, which finances 2 applicants to every one of our popular one-day intensives. We would greatly appreciate your help in growing this important program, which helps ensure that our classes include diverse voices and perspectives. And of course, we welcome your unrestricted donations to help us operate in general. You can donate to any of these funds by texting the number in the chat or visiting our auction page. We also will pause for a brief live donation session halfway through the night. The auction will be open throughout the night for your bidding or donations. Check out the chat for information and links to all, along with the program you can download. A word about tonight's program. We are delighted to welcome 5 of the most talented authors writing today, whose work is both timely and timeless. Our first group of readings will include Katharine Holabird, Leslie Jamison, and Susan Choi. After that, we will open the room for Q&A and discussion with these 3 authors. We will have a short break and then continue with our 2 honored poets, Toi Derricotte and Jericho Brown. And then we'll open things again to have another Q&A. During the readings and presentations, we will all be muted. So please feel free to submit your questions and comments for the authors or anyone else in the chat. I'll be here intermittently to shepherd you through the night, and our program director, Jennifer Franklin, will be introducing most of the authors and moderating the Q&A sessions. The private rooms will remain open throughout the night if you want to break with your friends. But please note, you won't hear or see the program when you do so. So we encourage everyone to stick around and then enjoy your rooms again for as long as you like together after the show. Before we begin our readings, I am delighted to welcome founding board member and long-term supporter of the Writers Center, Nick Robinson, who will say a few words about Don Stever, our retiring chairman. Here's Nick.
Thank you very much, Bill, and welcome to everyone to this unique evening together. It's really an extraordinary time, but the fact that this many people gather together in the name of poetry and writing is truly inspirational. It's my privilege to introduce and to toast. I raise my single malt here, John Barleycorn. He welcomed the creation of a new beverage 200 years after a quote that I'm going to begin my remarks with. At least since 1640, the English south of Scotland had this poetic turn of irony. For want of a nail, the shoe is lost, and for want of a shoe, the horse is lost. For want of a horse, the rider is lost. And so it goes. The battle is lost, the kingdom is lost. William Shakespeare and Benjamin Franklin and James Baldwin and myriad others repeated this image. In her novel, A Wind in the Door, Madeleine L'Engle, her sequel to A Wrinkle in Time, invokes the prophetic imagery of this phrase for her characters to explain how a microscopic figure or creature could affect the fate of the universe. The care of the hoof of the loyal horse, as the equestrian Margot Stever knows, is essential to the health of the steed and rider alike. But for such care, the fate of matters small and large is at risk. Now, some might skewer my choice of this phrase as banal and see it as grist for the butt of many jokes, but give me leave to redeem the consequence of this concept of but-for causation tonight. Seemingly small and largely invisible efforts are essential to our own existence. Indeed, the readings in the great room at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, where Bill is tonight, often explore such but-for causation experiences. They're endemic to what it means to be a human. Here are some of the but-for happenings for you, causations without which you would not be assembled in virtual reality on Zoom here tonight. Please share my testimony about these but-for events in the life of the Hudson Valley Writers Center. First, but for the love of nature and the poetic muse that it inspires, as when the poetry of love and life emerged a stone's throw from the bank of the Potomac River, where a bass viol player in the Department of Justice moonlighted while applying the laws to protect the environment, he would not have come to know Margot, and we would not have the united Margot and Don Stever. But for the daring that both of them had to set new routes along the Hudson River, far from the Potomac, to pioneer, in Don's case, establishing the world's first university academic discipline dedicated to the teaching and study of environmental law, Sleepy Hollow would not have its coastline protected by the former chair of its planning board and a village trustee who wrote the laws protecting the Pocatico River and the Hudson River outside the Writers Center. But for the imagination, creativity, and foresight in 1980 that helped to envision restoring a ruin, a literal ruin of the Phillips Manor Railroad Station into a space, creative space for writing and speaking, we would not have had the New York State's Commissioner of Historic Preservation, Winthrop Aldrich, come down from Albany to help cut the ribbon, launching what is now the celebrated and award-winning landmark, the permanent home of the Hudson River Writers Center. But for, as is said, quote, a lot of work behind the scenes for more than 4 decades, more than most of us on this Zoom would like to remember, by a world-class intellect and lawyer. In fact, the renowned Slipper and Hall Press and the Hudson Valley Writers Center would simply not be. But for the drafting of the Hudson River Writers Center's articles of incorporation, its bylaws, its tax filings for federal and state tax exemptions, countless grant applications and land use applications and permits, have you glazed over yet? There would be no legal personality nor public face for the Hudson Valley Writers Center. But for 4 decades of arduous and numbing but skillful negotiations with the powerful and impersonal Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the awesome MTA, literally a battle with Goliath, if there ever was one, we would not have today, Just for Writers, the enchanting space for readings in the Hudson Valley Writers Center. And but for the devoted, patient, and endless attendance at meetings of the Hudson Valley Writers Center Board of Directors and his service as a fiduciary with deep ethics and profound commitment to pro bono service, the governance system of the Hudson Valley Writers Center would have long disintegrated. But for, on another front, the culinary artistry in his kitchen and the superb instincts as a host, many invited writers and visitors to events at the Writers Center would have lacked an inspiring welcome and send-off and the warmth of hospitality. And but for the lawyer behind the scenes, the legal foundation laid in 1990 for the award-winning Slapper and Hall Press could not have sustained his extraordinary publishing accomplishments, which Margot Stever launched. But for the adroit maneuvering, while Metro-North rebuilt the Phillips Manor train platforms and reset the railway ties outside the building, constructively evicting the Hudson Valley Writers Center from its home through the noise and chaos of construction for nearly 2 years. The bridge of uninterrupted creative writing could not have been sustained between the past, the present, and now into the future. But for many late night confabs and weekend strategy sessions, some over the occasional single malt, the quiet counsel to mediate between willful personalities and conflicting policy advocates, battling about how best to advance the Writers' Center's mission, there would have been no emerged pathways to the equilibrium and consensus that the Writers' Center enjoys today. And but for the bonhomie, the warm and ready laugh, the humility and persistent perseverance, the intellectual rigor and deep love of writing and writers, we would not be here tonight to celebrate an essential incarnation of the but-for cause in Don Stever's accomplishments. Let's be plain. But for Don, you and I would not be here tonight. The Hudson Valley Writers Center would still be waiting to be invented. Don has stepped down now from his post as board chair. He's done it before and been re-elected back to that post several times, but this time he passes the baton fully on to a next generation, confident that the Hudson Valley Writers Center able board of directors, its dedicated staff, Krista Madston, Jennifer Franklin, and Christina Papadopoulos, its inspired teachers, its wise advisory board members, its experienced press editors, and indeed all of you individually will carry the Writers' Center forward. The muse is strong in the Writers' Center. Today, the strength of the Writers' Center is the greatest testimonial to Don's years of devoted and quiet and effective leadership in support of writing and reading and listening. His service has enriched our souls and enabled the muse to steer in hundreds of creative, artistic minds. We, each of us, are in his debt. It is my privilege and joy to introduce to you my friend for 40 years, to toast him with a single malt, the husband of the Poetess and Writers' Center founder, Margot Taft Stever, the inimitable, but for Don Stever.
Oh. Thank you, Nick. That's a little over the top for me, I think, but thank you very much. And thank you everyone in our big Zoom room for joining us in our first ever and hopefully last ever virtual benefit for the Hudson Valley Writers Center. 30 years is a long time. And as Nick said, 35 years in a way. We've come a long way since my wife, Margot Taft Stever, founded the Writers Center in 1988. And we formed the corporation a few years later. To steal a line from Jerry Garcia, what a long, strange trip it's been. But thanks to all of you who've supported us along the way, the center can look forward to a bright future. Especially, we look forward to returning to our home at the Phillips Manor Station, which is an historic landmark which overlooks the Hudson River. A uniquely inspiring space for readers and writers. And, Pat Farwell's in the audience, and Pat's brother helped us get the building on the National Register of Historic Places all those many years ago. Now, although we intend to continue offering programs online, as we have over the past several months, we're anxious to reestablish the unique community that exists when creative and interested people come together to explore the literary arts at our headquarters. Nick and I, along with Margot and a score of others, have a lot of stories to share about the difficult and often bizarre history of securing our currently sort of ownership of the building, its restoration that cost over $800,000, and how that money was raised, and the odyssey of working to secure full unencumbered ownership of the building that I'm hopeful will occur by the end of the year. Let me also say that due to the brilliant thought, planning, and execution by our staff, Jennifer, Krista, and Christina, the Writers Center's educational and public reading programs were quickly moved to an online framework and have, as a result, developed a national and international audience, which they never had before. As I leave the chairmanship of the board of the Writers Center, I'd like to mention a few highlights that are sources of both pride and confidence to me. First is the breadth and depth of the programs we offer at the Writers Center and how we've enriched them over the years. We're the only literary arts organization in the New York metropolitan area that offers writing workshops, a first-rate reading series, and our own nationally recognized press, a vibrant outreach program to underserved children. Our writing workshops are taught by instructors who are all published authors and active mentors of all of our students. A source of enormous pride to all of us is the high level of publication that our students achieve. In one class alone, taught by our program director, Jennifer Franklin, all 8 students have published work since joining the class. Mentoring is the DNA of the Writers Center. Our reading series covers all genres, fiction, nonfiction, memoir, poetry, and drama. As you will hear tonight, we welcome authors with unique voices and world-class talent. It's a pleasure to bring this caliber of writing to our audiences. Our nationally recognized press, Slapping Hall Press, founded in 1990 by Margot Taft Stever, is one of the oldest and most respected chapbook publishers in the United States. Celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, the Slapping Hall Press spotlights promising new poets whose work has not yet appeared in book form, and through its conversation series that fosters collaborations between new women poets and established authors. Many SHP authors have had successful careers launched by the press and have gone on to great success. Many of you are doubtless unaware that the Slapping Hall Press published Toi Derricotte, who will be reading this evening, in its very early Voices from the River anthology in 1990. Our outreach program, an integral part of our mission, which brings in-person creative writing instruction to immigrant and economically disadvantaged children and at-risk youth, is the only program we've not been able to transition online. As you can imagine, the in-person connection between teacher and student in creative writing is vital. We are working right now to find ways to continue this important work remotely, and of course to reestablish in-person teaching as soon as we can. A new outreach program we've been able to implement during the pandemic is our highly successful Scholarship for People of Color that welcomes 2 applicants to each of our highly successful masterclass workshops. This has been made possible by a generous grant from the estate of one of our longtime students. And we hope to raise additional funds for this scholarship program this evening, because you can bid and grant money to this in our auction. Now, people often ask me how such a small nonprofit organization manages to accomplish so much. The answer, of course, is dedicated, energized people who care about the literary arts. This includes our board. And at this point, let me separately acknowledge Jim Tilley, who's also retiring from his position as treasurer. I talked Jim into joining the board as treasurer a number of years ago. He then served briefly as chairman during the short time I retired from the board in 2012, and graciously agreed to rejoin the board as treasurer in 2015 when I came back to salvage a financial debacle. The center will miss Jim. The good news, though, is that Richard Baker, who served as a board member in the 1990s, agreed to return and put on the treasurer's mantle, and so we're in good hands. Our staff: Jennifer Franklin, our program director and an accomplished poet; Krista Madsen, our managing director, who's written 2 novels. And I will say, by the way, that Krista and our wonderful technical assistant, Christina Papadopoulos, just found out that one of their children was sent home from school having been exposed to COVID-19. And so, I mean, this is the strange world that we now live in. But anyway, our staff has just done wonders for the Writers Center. And our supporters: Arts Westchester, the New York State Council on the Arts, several loyal foundations, including the Bidale Foundation and the David G. Taft Foundation, and especially all of you who come to our readings, take our courses, and join our reading groups. And donate to the center. Students, audience members, donors, you make all this possible. Thank you. One final note: as we've transitioned to the online format, we've been enormously gratified and pleasantly surprised by the broad appeal of our programs to new audiences from across the country, and in fact, across the world. Just last week, when Edward Hirsch and Jeffrey Harrison read, our audience of over 150 included guests from Los Angeles, London, Edinburgh, Trinidad, and the list goes on. So what does all this tell us? It tells us our mission is right and we should keep at it. It tells us that our belief in the incalculable riches of the literary arts is shared by many. It tells us, unsurprisingly, that now, more than ever, the healing power of literature is essential to all of us. Without being too grand, I believe this is a noble cause, bringing literature to the public in a time when nobility is in short supply. Before I end, I have to urge us all to raise our glass, and I have a glass here to raise, to our vice chairperson, Mary Linder, and to Christina Papadopoulos and the members of a benefit committee who pulled off a difficult feat in putting this together. The email and text traffic, meetings and phone calls that Mary managed are truly awe-inspiring, and Christina's organizational and technical wizardry were critical to making it all work. Thank you. In closing, I'd again like to thank all of you for joining us tonight and for your continuing support to the Writers Center. Now it's a pleasure to begin our program of readings by some of the best authors writing today, an example of what the Writers Center is all about and what you, our supporters, help us to achieve. Thank you.
Katharine Holabird is the award-winning author of Angelina Ballerina and a new collection of children's books about a lovable little fairy called Twinkle. Katharine grew up in a family of architects and artists in Chicago, and as a child, she loved to perform and dance with her 3 sisters. She graduated with a BA in literature from Bennington College and started writing children's books in 1983. Since then, Angelina Ballerina books have sold millions of copies, been translated into over 20 languages, and Angelina has become a children's classic. A few years ago, she delighted the children of Sleepy Hollow with a wonderful benefit reading from the Angelina Ballerina series, complete with a real-life ballerina. We are so happy to welcome her back to the Hudson Valley Writers Center tonight. Thank you for all of your support over the years. Please help me welcome Katharine Holabird.
Hi, I'm Katharine Holabird, and it's a real pleasure to be here today to read to you and to talk to you a little bit about my creation, Angelina Ballerina, who has been around since 1983 when I wrote the very first Angelina Ballerina book called Angelina Ballerina. My two children were going to ballet school. My daughters had just started ballet, and they were 5 and 3, and they loved to dress up and dance. It was just their favorite activity. And it took me back to my own childhood in Chicago when I was growing up with my sisters, and how much we used to love to dress up and dance too. It's a very magical part of childhood. And when I had a chance to write a storybook, I knew I wanted to write about that character who loved dance with a passion and who was so adventurous and who had such a feisty spirit. And so Angelina came to be quite organically from my own life and my children's life. And I had the great good fortune, of course, to meet Helen Craig, the brilliant illustrator who has been working on Angelina with me all these years. And Helen and I started out doing something called the Little Mouse ABCs, or learning books. This was the first one we did, long time ago, and there were gorgeous mice. So Helen started out doing mice. She's always been quite partial to mice. I wrote the script, and she did those marvelous illustrations. And then the publishers were looking for storybooks for Helen. And I went home, and there were my daughters dancing around the kitchen, and I thought, I have to sit down and write something for them and for Helen. And so I wrote Angelina Ballerina very much at the kitchen table, and Helen made a beautiful, illustrated it, I remember, in pen and ink and wash, and she took it to the publishers, and the rest is history. This wonderful character came to be, and we've made many beautiful books together since then. It has been a great and wonderful journey, and I feel so lucky to have had this wonderful shared creativity and wonderful experience with Helen and with Angelina all these years. It's really been very special. This new edition is from Simon & Angelina is from Simon & Schuster. This is our new publisher, and Helen and I are absolutely thrilled. As you can see, the books are gorgeous, and they're also doing a lot of specialty books like Angelina Loves and little ready to reads and paperbacks, different places. So it's a great publishing program. We just feel so lucky. So today I thought it would be fun to read the next book that Simon & Schuster is publishing, of the classic books, which is Angelina and the Princess. This story, it was my second book, so it's very much the beginning of Angelina's history. And this is a first edition that I'm reading today. There is a gorgeous new Simon & Schuster edition coming out in about a month, but I thought it'd be fun to read the first edition for you. Angelina and the Princess, and I hope you will enjoy the story. I won't be able to show you the illustrations tonight, but another time. And or you have the book and you can look them up. But sit back and enjoy Angelina and the Princess. Angelina was much too excited to sleep. The students at Miss Lily's ballet school had been asked to dance for Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Mouseland. Mr. Lightfoot, director of the famous Royal Ballet Company, was coming tomorrow to help Miss Lily choose the best ballerinas for the special performance. Angelina wanted a leading part so much that she worked on her pliés and her pirouettes far into the night when she should have been fast asleep. The next morning, Angelina woke up feeling terrible. Her head ached and her ears buzzed. Angelina's mother shook her head sadly and took her temperature. "I'm afraid you'll have to stay in bed," she said. "You can't go to ballet school when you're not well." But Angelina was determined to go, and while her mother was busy downstairs, Angelina packed her ballet bag, and she tiptoed out of the house. Angelina arrived at Miss Lily's ballet school just in time to join her friends, Flora and Felicity, and all the other ballerinas who were waiting to go on stage. Flora did a nimble leap and a delicate spin, and then it was Angelina's turn to dance. Her heart started beating like a drum, and she couldn't remember what she was supposed to be doing. The music started. Angelina knew she had to begin. She tried one step, she tried another. Then Angelina began twirling and spinning like a top until she was so dizzy she lost her balance, tripped on her pink ribbons, and tumbled down with a thump. Flora and Felicity were given the leading roles in the dance of the Flower Fairies. Later, Miss Lily called for Angelina. "I'm afraid you will have to take a smaller part this time," she said, trying to be kind. When Angelina got home, her mother was very upset. "How could you run away like that when I told you to stay in bed?" she asked. Angelina burst into tears. "I had to go to Miss Lily's, but everything went wrong. I danced so badly for Mr. Lightfoot. I will never be a real ballerina. I'm not going to ballet school anymore." Angelina's mother hugged her and kissed her and carried her upstairs. And in just a minute, Angelina was fast asleep in her own bed again. The next morning, Angelina's headache was gone. She felt better, but she was still very sad. "It's not fair," said Angelina. "Maybe not," her mother said gently. "But things don't always go our way. You can still do your best with whatever part you are given, and that will help the whole performance." Angelina thought about what her mother had said. Then she returned to Miss Lily's after all, and she rehearsed very hard with the other ballerinas for the royal performance. After Angelina had learned her own part, she memorized the dance of the Flower Fairies while watching Flora and Felicity. On the day of the royal performance, just as the show was about to begin, Flora tripped and sprained her ankle. Everyone was terribly upset. Mr. Lightfoot and Miss Lily turned to each other in horror. "Who can do the part?" they cried. Angelina was worried about Flora, but Susie stepped forward and said, "Angelina can." Angelina showed Miss Lily that she had learned the dance by heart. "But what about Flora?" she asked. "Don't worry," said Miss Lily. "We have a treat for Flora." So Flora was happy because she was invited to sit right next to the Princess of Mouseland. Mr. Lightfoot and Miss Lily were happy because the performance could go on. Angelina was happy because she did the dance of the Flower Fairies without forgetting a single step. The Princess of Mouseland was happy because she loved ballet. When the performance was over, the princess congratulated Angelina and thanked her warmly for saving the show. And I thank you warmly for listening, and I hope you enjoyed Angelina and the Princess.
Leslie Jamison was born in Washington, D.C. and grew up in Los Angeles. A graduate of Harvard College and the Iowa Writers Workshop, she is the author of the essay collection, The Empathy Exams, a New York Times bestseller, the novel, The Gin Closet, a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, the memoir, The Recovering, and most recently, the essay collection, Make It Scream, Make It Burn. Her work has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, Harper's, the Oxford American, among others, and she's a columnist for the New York Times Book Review. She teaches at Columbia University and lives in Brooklyn. Many of you will have read her incredible piece on becoming symptomatic in the New York Review in the very beginning of the pandemic. Please help me welcome Leslie Jamison.
Hi, my name is Leslie Jamison, and I'm thrilled to be reading here tonight in support of the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I think, like so many of us, I've been spending a lot of the past 6 months missing various forms of community, trying to build forms of community that feel possible in these days when our bodies can't be together, and just feeling a lot of gratitude and appreciation for all the ways in which people and institutions have been building community and community in the writing world for decades. And the Hudson Valley Writers Center does some of that beautiful, beautiful work around building community. And so I'm just really honored to be here supporting that work in whatever small way tonight. And thank you all for coming as well. I thought I would read a short essay called Layover Story from my most recent collection, Make It Scream, Make It Burn, which came out a year ago, 2019. And the essays in Make It Scream, Make It Burn are about all kinds of things, and many of them actually are about strange, unexpected forms of community as well. There's an essay about the people all over the world who have become obsessed with the blue whale, known as the loneliest whale in the world, a whale who has a singularly high-pitched song and has always been traveling alone, and has inspired everybody from a Polish tabloid photographer to a woman recovering from a coma up in Harlem to sort of attach themselves to its story and find inspiration in its singular existence. There's an essay about kids who have past life memories and the ways that their families try to make sense of those memories. There's an essay about the variety of ways that people have built alternate lives for themselves online, including the virtual realm known as Second Life, where, you know, a woman who has multiple sclerosis can jump across islands in this virtual realm. A woman with legal blindness can see the world more clearly, actually, when it's pixelated on a screen. A woman who can't have children can raise a family. And that essay, though I wrote it several years ago, has come to feel weirdly prescient in this time that I think we're all thinking about how to come together virtually, even if we're also hungry for days when we can come together safely in other ways as well. In any case, Make It Scream, Make It Burn is about intimacy, it's about community, it's about art making, it's about the various forms that obsession bring us, the various ways in which obsession brings us together, and brings us into the task of making art. Some of the essays are personal, some of them are critical, some of them are reported, and I believe in all those ways of being curious about the world and trying to document the world. The essay I'm going to read to you all tonight is called Layover Story, and it's just about a 24-hour period and a chance encounter with a stranger, and you'll see what unfolds in that encounter. But one of the things that I've been thinking about since the pandemic is that one of the things we've lost or have had to reshape in new forms is the ability to have these kinds of chance encounters with the lives of others. This one happens on a layover in an airplane, but I think we're missing them in all kinds of forms on the subway, on the sidewalks, in the passage in a bookstore, in the grocery store, in the bodega line. I'm missing strangers in those ways, and so in this moment, reading this essay also feels like an homage to those moments of encounter with strangers, wherever and however they happen. This is Layover Story. This is the story of a layover. Who tells that story? I'm telling it to you now. One January evening, my flight got delayed out of Louisiana, where I'd been talking to people about their past lives, and I missed my connection in Houston. I had a night there. Trying to have a travel experience near the Houston airport is like trying to write a poem from the words on a yeast packet. Don't try to make it beautiful, just let it rise. Let the freeways run like unspooled thread into the night. Blink against the neon signs of chain stores. Take shelter where you can. I take shelter at the Salmon Pink Hotel where I am sent. On our shuttle from the airport, I hear the voice of a difficult woman coming from the front row. She can't believe the bus will run only hourly the next morning. She can't believe her dinner voucher is for so little money. She needs someone to take her bag into the lobby. She'll also need someone to fetch it tomorrow. Later, at the hotel restaurant, her voice is there again at the table behind me. She wants her bag placed where she can see it. She wants her water without ice. She doesn't want to be a pain, but she really needs to know if the veggie wrap is absolutely 100% vegetarian. She wants to know about the other stranded people sitting around us, especially Martin, the German, and the Penn State math major. The math major loves Pie Day. The woman with a voice wants to know if she bakes pie for Pie Day. No, she just eats pie for Pie Day. What kind of pie does she like? All kinds. What kind of math does she like? All kinds. Well, okay. She especially likes patterns and sequences. The woman with the voice wants to know how she feels about I to the I. The undergrad doesn't know about I to the I. Oh, girlfriend, says the woman with a voice. Go look up I to the I. When she finally turns to me, the woman with a voice turns out to be a woman with curly black hair. She asks what I do for a living. She loves that I'm a writer. She tells me she wants to get into the interviewing business. Seems like she's already in it. Turns out she's coming back from a vacation in Cabo. Turns out she's on my flight back to Newark. She suggests we protest the hourly shuttles together. The 4 a.m. departure is too early for our flight, but the 5 a.m. is too late. We should campaign for a 4:40 or a 4:45. She is a difficult woman from New York, trying to convince me that we should be difficult women from New York together. But I'm not a difficult woman from New York. I'm not any kind of person from New York. I just happen to live there. I just want to take the 4 a.m. shuttle and stop talking about it. It embarrasses me to be associated with her request, with her sense of entitlement, with these justifications. I hurt more, I need more, perhaps because I recognize myself in them. It's only when the woman and I walk to the front desk to check on the shuttle that I notice how she walks. The woman with the voice is also a woman with a body. She's limping. Once I notice her limp, I feel guilty about leaving her to make the shuttle request alone, as if it would be an act of abandonment in her hour of need to refuse her my company. She tells the clerk she needs help with her bags, and in the morning she will need help again. She explains that she was in a wheelchair at the airport. I bet she has one of those nebulous pain conditions where the pain is always moving somewhere else. I bet she felt like a victim before she ever started hurting. I am actually thinking these things, and I am someone who has written indignantly about the world's tendency to minimize the pain of women in precisely these ways, for precisely these reasons. We don't get our 4:40 shuttle. She's going to speak to a manager. She tells me she'll call me when she gets this sorted out. She takes my number. We trade our names. Back in my room, I Google the name she's given me. It's fairly unusual and involves a body part. The first 10 hits are all the same porn star. The next hit is an article about a stabbing spree on the Upper West Side a year earlier. A homeless man lunged at 5 strangers with a half scissors. The face of the woman with a voice is one of the 5 faces. I enlarge her on my screen. I try to remember her limp, which part of her was hurting. 5 people, including a 2-year-old boy, were rushed to the hospital after a man went on a 9-minute rampage. I picture the woman with a voice, with scissors in her thigh or her knee or her foot, severing some nerve or vein and leaving her, a year later, still limping. When I see her in the morning, I won't tell her what I know. The etiquette of our era demands that we pretend we are still unknown to each other, though she will know I probably Googled her, and I will know she probably Googled me. But I find myself reframing everything I've seen her do, every complaint, every demand, every annoying attempt at small talk, as if a victim couldn't also be a solipsist. Now I want to read everything about her more generously in order to compensate her for the indignity of becoming a character in my story, the woman with the voice, when she was already another kind of character in another story entirely. The next morning, I try to help the woman with the voice as best I can. I carry her bags through the Houston airport. I offer to stay with her while she waits for her wheelchair. I barely grimace when she speaks rudely to the airport staff. She's been stabbed. She asks me to pre-board the plane with her and get her bag stowed above her seat. She asks if I'd help her get from Newark to the city once we arrive, if I can get her through the airport train station in New Jersey, through New Jersey Transit, then through Penn Station itself in New York, all those stairs and escalators and platforms and doorways and crowds and crowded baggage racks. I say, yes, 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 yes to all of it. She has a story and now I'm part of it. I'm swollen with virtue. I'm so swollen with virtue I can hardly believe it when the man sitting next to me on the flight wants to have a conversation. Doesn't he understand? My virtue has already found its object. I have none left for small talk with strangers. The woman with the voice is sitting in the front of the plane, probably making someone wish they were sitting in the back. The man next to me starts talking about driving his sister out to Texas, where she was moving for work. She's a traveling nurse, and they drove through an ice storm in Atlanta, and I really couldn't care less. This guy is just a kid complaining about the Houston airport not having enough vending machines. I feel like his mother, as if I should offer him a snack. On the tiny monitors above us, a nature documentary plays. A baby bison is getting cornered by a pack of wolves. What will happen next? Only one thing we all know. Back home in Brooklyn, no one is waiting for me. I'm newly single and not so newly 30, and leaving lots of crumbs between my couch cushions from dinners made of crackers that don't seem like the dinners of an adult. Now this guy is talking about his tour in Iraq. He says he got used to desert skies. Oh, his life is a little different than I thought. I don't know how to ask him about the war, but I ask him anyway. I ask him about the guys he was there with. That seems safe, possible. He shakes his head, the best crew of guys ever. Now here I am, he says, nudging his duffel bag, flying home with an army bag full of hermit crab shells. I ask how many are in there. Maybe 50, he says. He has a daughter and she has 4 pet hermit crabs. I ask if they have names. They've got so many names I can't keep track, he says. Their names are always changing. Right now there is one named Clippers and the others are Peaches. All 3 of them? Yep, just Peaches and Peaches and Peaches. He says they need a bottomless buffet of shells. They keep getting bigger, so they keep needing new ones. So the shells in his bag aren't hermit crab shells because they were made by hermit crabs, but because hermit crabs might someday use them. Yes, he says, that is correct. Perhaps there is profundity in this. We claim something not by making it, but by making it useful. What we squat inside can begin to constitute us. And now he's saying something else, something about the new aquarium he's building for Clippers and the Peaches. He's using old shower doors from his construction company. He has over 20 large sheets of glass, he says, and more than 50 smaller ones. And I'm trying to run the meaning-making logic over this one too. We have the big and the small. We have more than we can use, but it doesn't yield. Houston all over again. And how big will his crab aquarium be anyway? An entire city block? This guy can't decide whether to be interesting or not, like someone who is mostly late, but every once in a while, unaccountably on time. Why would I possibly believe he owed me interest anyway? Other lives are shells I want to scavenge only when the mood strikes right, only when the shells are good enough. For now, I want to know what these crabs eat. He says they'll eat pellets, but they prefer fresh fruit. What kind of fruit? Pineapples, he says. They love pineapples. He explains they have a lot of preferences. For example, they need salt water and fresh water. What about when they live in the ocean? I ask. How do they get fresh water then? He doesn't know. He says, that's what I'm still trying to figure out. This man punctures me. I felt like his mother until he said he was a father. I think of all the fear he's known, the guilt and loss and boredom, and how I don't know any of it. His endlessness is something I receive in finite anecdotes, big desert skies, a little girl poking crabs. Sometimes I feel I owe a stranger nothing, and then I feel I owe him everything, because I forgot for a moment that his life, like everyone else's, holds more than I could ever possibly see. It makes me think of that David Foster Wallace commencement speech, "This is water," the one that everyone finds inspiring except the people who think it's unbearably trite and find it pathetic that everyone else is so inspired by it. I'm so inspired by it. Wallace talks about the tedium of standing at a supermarket checkout counter, irritated by the other people in line, how stupid and cow-like and dead-eyed and non-human they seem. But, he says, you can choose to see them differently. You can regard the woman who just yelled at her kid and admit that for all you know, she might have just stayed up 3 nights straight with a husband dying of bone cancer. Maybe she just helped your spouse get through some tangle at the DMV. Maybe the annoying woman on the bus just got stabbed by a deranged stranger on her morning jog. If you learn to pay attention, he says, it will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer hell-type situation as not only meaningful but sacred, on fire with the same force that lit the stars.
My name is Lauren Akampora, and it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Choi. As it happens, Susan visited the Writers' Center last fall, almost exactly to this day. She read from her new novel, Trust Exercise, which was at that moment a finalist for the National Book Award. We all had our fingers crossed for her, and I remember watching the live stream of the award ceremony just a few weeks later and screaming out loud when her name was announced as the winner of the 2019 National Book Award for Fiction. We're thrilled to have Susan here again with us tonight, and I'm happy to give her a new, updated introduction. Susan Choi was born in South Bend, Indiana, and was raised there and in Houston, Texas. She studied literature at Yale and writing at Cornell, and worked for several years as a fact checker for The New Yorker. Her first novel, The Foreign Student, won the Asian American Literary Award for Fiction. Her second novel, American Woman, was a finalist for the 2004 Pulitzer Prize and was released as a feature film last year. Her third novel, A Person of Interest, was a finalist for the 2009 PEN/Faulkner Award, and her fourth novel, My Education, received a 2014 Lammy Award. Her first book for children, Camp Tiger, was published last spring, as was her fifth novel, Trust Exercise. Trust Exercise was the winner of the National Book Award for Fiction and was a national bestseller. It was also named a Best Book of 2019 by The Washington Post, Vanity Fair, New York Magazine, Marie Claire, Cosmopolitan, BuzzFeed, Entertainment Weekly, Los Angeles Times, Elle, Bustle, Town and Country, Publishers Weekly, The Millions, Chicago Tribune, and Time Magazine. Of Trust Exercise, the Boston Globe writes, "A rare and splendid literary creature, piercingly intelligent, engrossingly entertaining, and so masterfully intricate that only after you finish it, stunned, can you step back and marvel." Susan's nonfiction has also appeared in publications such as Vogue, Tin House, Allure, O Magazine, and the New York Times. She was named the inaugural recipient of the PEN W.G. Sebald Award and has also been a recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Guggenheim Foundation. She is now joining us from Brooklyn. Please join me in welcoming Susan Choi.
At last, the ends and the means seem to match. They have a new movement teacher who will teach them to move. They will learn to move by moving. They will learn to free their movements by free movement. The movement teacher's mission is so simple, Sarah finds it idiotic. There's something else about the movement teacher Sarah vaguely dislikes. She's not sure how to feel when she realizes her dislike stems from the fact that the new teacher is female. Mr. Kingsley, Mr. Brown, Mr. Friedman, Mr. Macy, who does set design, dramaturgy, and theater history, all men, Ms. Roseau will teach them movement. From the moment they meet her, they all disrespect her covertly. Something in Mr. Kingsley's gaze as he introduces Ms. Roseau warns them. They may mock her, but they'd better keep it quiet. She's a dancer and multidisciplinary performer, and she trembles with joy at the prospect of being their teacher. Teaching is a sacred trust, she gushes. You are the future. Despite their secret disrespect, they are secretly flattered. They'll give her a chance. Since their tryst in the second-floor hallway, David has severed the wire. There's no longer even anger as a point of connection. His gaze backpedals from Sarah's like a magnet escaping its likeness. He has mastered the trick of existing elsewhere, even when they're in the same room. An alien lives in his body. Amnesia has sponged clean his brain. With each confirmation that David has vanished, Sarah feels more anguished and exposed. Movement class will be held in the black box. They arrive as the seniors are leaving, and Sarah sees David pausing with Erin O'Leary. Erin is a senior, petite and blonde, her flawless face grave with the consciousness of her preeminence. Erin has a film credit, a SAG card. She drives a pale blue Carmen Ghia convertible. The sheer quantity of her superiorities is laughable. She's like an implausible fictional character. Her tiny body with its ideal tiny hips and tiny breasts and compact little ass drags generalized attention like a net. The boys, even the senior boys, fear her. She is rumored to date real established actors whom she meets on her sets. The girls loathe her. She travels in a cylinder of rarefied air, untroubled by her social isolation. She's only here because it's trashy to drop out of high school. Next year, she'll attend Juilliard. Where are you headed? David says to Erin. Restoration comedy. You? Movement. Ugh, I hated it. We ought to get showers. Oh, you're okay, David says, to which Erin laughs charmingly. She is so perfectly, adorably small that the crown of her glossy blonde head barely grazes his chin. She gazes up at him, contentedly submissive. A girl who can do anything she wants, can date a sophomore if she wants, anoint him. Sarah plows into the black box blind with revelation. Her cheeks, armpits, and crotch squirm with needles of heat, her familiar stigmata. Within the fist of her chest, her ribs snap like so many dry twigs. Welcome, Ms. Roseau is exulting. Welcome to movement. Right away, Ms. Roseau has them leave their chairs, their books and jackets and purses, and come down to the great square platform of the stage. Sarah has difficulty relinquishing her pile of books, folders, spiral-bound notebooks, the tattered, fractionally digested paperback of Tropic of Cancer on the top of the heap like a cake decoration. She has been pressing the pile to her chest like a shield or a bandage. She feels that giving it up will cause physical pain. Her chest groans at the fresh exposure. She can hardly stand straight. David is somewhere behind her. She can feel him there, looking at her when she can't turn around and look back. Perhaps they're all looking at her. They all know her dilemma. Yesterday, trying to escape David's baffling absence, which she now understands, she'd climbed up to the fly rail and, instead of solitude, found Pammy's face blotched and sticky with tears. 24 feet in the air, they'd had no recourse but to speak to each other, two girls, compelled by their classwork to a level of intimacy far beyond what they shared with the rest of the world, and yet also two girls who had never once traded a single superfluous word. "You love him, don't you?" Pammy had said. The black box was just as it sounded, a black box of a room with a large platform stage at the center, low enough to require no stairs. 4 sets of riser seating on each side, and aisles around the platform and around each set of risers. During performances, black drapery made the aisles behind the risers into a backstage, but today the drapery is furled, the box is open to its walls and its faraway ceiling, crisscrossed by the lighting catwalks. Ms. Rosso says they are to walk, 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 move, move, move. All through this marvelous space, they must make themselves free to explore every inch. Not the catwalks or ladders, no. Laughter. "All right," she says, "you are all very clever. You will explore all terrestrial inches. In literature, there is an idea called automatic writing. You will write without resting your pen. The pen must keep moving and moving. Perhaps it is writing, 'Why the fuck do I have to keep writing?'" More laughter, shocked and charmed at her profanity. Her profanity, tinged as it is with her accent, is more charming than shocking. Is it possible they could respect her? Well, this unbroken movement of the pen unlocks the secrets within. And if the pen can do this, then how much more the whole body? Let your body lead you. Your only order to it, never stop moving. Otherwise, it is in charge. I will help you with music. Oh no. They can't respect her. It's perfectly ridiculous. The music she's playing, Cat Stevens, the moody blues. Satirically then, they walk, 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 making faces at each other, swinging their arms, bouncing on the balls of their feet, speeding up comically, so they're marching like robots. Whenever Norbert and Colin pass each other, they make absurd faces. Then, when they pass each other again, they both make absurd faces and leap in the air, still without breaking stride. This behavior spreads, evolves. Most of the boys adore Monty Python and embarrass the girls at lunch with their flawlessly recalled and completely unfunny enactments of skits by which they, the performers, are slain with hilarity. In the black box, the boys do silly walks and then pratfalls in motion to show they are slain with hilarity. By and large, the girls grow increasingly serious as the boys grow increasingly ludicrous. The girls no longer walk. They glide, they skim, they slice. The music changes to classical stuff without words. The girls begin taking on speed. An additional layer is added, high speed without hitting one another. They are weaving a mad tapestry with their movements. Some unpredictably change direction in the hope of collisions. No matter what they do, no matter how subversively they do it, Ms. Rosso cries from the sidelines, "Good! Move, move, move! Ah, you are making something." Indeed they are. Somehow, silliness dies. All the theatrical forms of movement, the silly walks and pratfalls, but also the arm swinging, I am carefree, and the deliberate direction changing, I am a rogue, leach out of the room. Unexpected collectivity has slowly emerged in its place. Perhaps most important, embarrassment has been given up. Without their having noticed it, they're no longer embarrassed. Their speed has equalized until they're all traveling at about the same rate. Their winding paths, their clover leaves and hairpins and loops knit some underlying pattern, as if they learned this maypole dance beside their parents as children, as if it binds them to something and makes of them something. Sarah's face is streaming tears. At one point where she ought to curve left or curve right, she goes straight and plunges out the black box doors and down the hall, running, her speed snatching the tears from her face. There's a single toilet stall at the back of the girls' dressing room, off stage right, which no one ever uses except during performances. Sarah locks herself in and succumbs, her whole body folded and violently jerking as if she'll throw up in the bowl. Her mind startles her with the wish to be dead instead of in pain. Suicide, she realizes, isn't opting out of the future. It's opting out of the present. For who can see more of the future than that? Reference to the future, to its unbroken promise, is the reflex of those for whom the future's mirage still exists. Such people are lucky, deceived. As if Sarah's thoughts had conjured her, Ms. Rosso comes into the dressing room and insists on discussing the future. Sarah cannot imagine how, apart from her own mind's self-defeating wizardry, this unwanted hippie French woman could have located her here in this bathroom. Ms. Rosso is brand new to the school. More than half the school's experienced students and teachers do not even realize this bathroom exists. But outside the stall door, Ms. Rosso is saying, "Sarah? Sarah?" mispronouncing both A's the same way. "Sarah, are you in there? Are you in pain?" "Please leave me alone," Sarah sobs angrily. Why is solitude so fucking hard to achieve? If only she had a car, she thinks for the billionth time. She would lock all the doors and just drive. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for unmuting me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to all of the readers for their wonderful offerings tonight. We're really happy to have all of you here with us. I'm going to ask some questions for the Q&A. I'd like to ask the office to please unmute Catherine and Susan.
Am I unmuted? I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. And Leslie.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Hi, Leslie. Hi, Catherine. Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for being here. Great readings. We have a lot of questions that have come in even before the readings tonight. We'll start with a question for Catherine. We have a question from someone who's been reading your books since she was young, and she just wanted to know from you, did you start out with an image or did you start out with an idea or a philosophy that you wanted to get across to your readers?
That's a good question. I like the question. I didn't really start with an image, although in a way, the image of a little, ebullient dancing child was very much the image of my childhood. So, I've always carried that with me, I think. And, but I work very much from the character, and then the character leads the story. And once I knew who Angelina was, she just took off. And I can put her in almost any situation, and she will, I kind of know how she's going to react. Sometimes she'll surprise me because she's got a very much a strong character of her own. But yeah, I kind of put her in a situation, let the story unfold. And I started with this feeling that I wanted to create a series of stories, or at least one Angelina Ballerina, the first book, for my children who were dancing at that time. They were very little, and it was such a important part of their childhood. And I thought so many children really love dance and music, and it's such a beautiful time in early childhood. It's so strong developmentally, and I wanted to write about it because I couldn't even find any books about a dancing child when my daughters were little, and Angelina just came to be because of this, what I saw as a very special moment in all of our lives around, that time when you really want nothing more than to get on a tutu and dance your heart out in the kitchen or wherever you are, as little girls do and still do wonderfully today. It hasn't changed. Did I answer the question?
Yes. Thank you so much. We have a question now for Leslie. And Anton has asked, has the fact of having released a book that deals with various forms of obsession transformed in some way your own relationship with it? Do you now find yourself viewing it from more of a distance or more objectively than before? And do you anticipate obsession taking on a different role in your future writing as a result of having written this book? Let's see. Right now, you're still, Leslie, on mute. If the office can please unmute Leslie Jamison, Leslie S.
Hey,
Jamison.
sorry. I think I had muted myself when I shouldn't have, when Katharine was giving her lovely answer to that question, which was making me think about how much my own daughter loves to watch this amazing recording that the Harlem Ballet Theater made of themselves dancing through Harlem, and she loves.
I haven't seen that. I have to watch it. Wow.
It's gorgeous, but it's exactly what you say. There's this vitality that comes from discovering what the body can do and having such an exuberant relationship to that. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Jennifer, so much for having me and having all of us. Thank you, Anton, if it's the Anton that I think it is, for that question. Yeah, I think, so as I mentioned a little bit, the ways that my own book is thinking about obsession is also thinking about obsession as a kind of, I think often obsession gets a reputation as a little bit of an isolating force, like Ahab and his monomaniacal pursuit of the white whale, or the ways in which obsession sort of drives us away from other people and deeper into our own secret, sometimes selfish passions. And I think one of the things that especially some of the reported pieces that I did for this book, like looking at all of the people who have become obsessed with the loneliest whale in the world, or looking at the kind of community of parents who believe their kids have past life memories, the ways in which people forge these pretty intricate and ongoing digital lives on platforms like Second Life, really made me think about obsession not only as an isolating force, but as a kind of community making force. And in that way, I guess I've become increasingly interested in the ways that sort of obsession can be turned or tweaked as into the kind of grounds for building connection with other people. So, I mean, in terms of my own personal relationship to obsession, I think that it's one of those things where you can think and think and think your way deeper into the root causes of something, and that doesn't always release its grip. So, I can think as hard as I want about my, bottomless desire for love, but I'm still going to have a bottomless desire for love. And I kind of think obsession is that same way. And maybe there was a time in my life when I wanted to figure out how to moderate the part of me that would get so obsessed with something for like a year that I felt like I couldn't think about something else. But I think at this point, I'm less interested in that sort of an idea of maturation as like you have to fight yourself in order to become a different person who can then live in the world as you always imagined adulthood would be, and more interested in saying, yeah, like what happens when we sort of let ourselves follow those obsessions, and how can we sort of sometimes see those obsessions as gifts we can give to other people as well. I think some of the writing that I did for this book made me feel that the ways that people followed their obsessions could become a kind of caregiving or a way of gifting the people around them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for unmuting me, office. Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. That was a great answer. And thank you, Anton, for the question. Now we'd like to go to Susan Choi. We got a lot of questions for Susan. One of the questions was about a short story that Beth Hahn's class all read called Flashlight in her short fiction class at the center. They admired its complexity and the way their feelings and ideas about each character shifted throughout. In the accompanying interview, you mentioned that this story might be part of a novel. Could you talk a little bit about the process of writing Flashlight? Did it begin as a question about trauma, as an image of a girl on the beach holding a flashlight? Finally, where are you now with Louisa and her mother?
Thanks for the questions, and I'm glad you enjoyed the story. I guess I'll address there were several questions there, so I think I'll start with what I started with. The story Flashlight actually came out of material that I'd been generating for a while at intervals. I tend to have some projects that I kind of work on very self-consciously as projects, and then other projects that kind of take form without my realizing it. And Flashlight is the latter kind. It was some characters that that I would write about every once in a while, and I never really had a clear sense of whether they were going to be characters in a novel or a story or nothing. And so I didn't know that much about the characters, except that they decide to expatriate from the United States, and they as a family, it's a mom, dad, and a young girl, they go to live overseas for a while. So I started writing about this family and this experience, and as often happens when I'm working, things started happening in the material that I wasn't expecting or planning on, including some bad stuff. Bad stuff started happening. And I wrote a lot without really being able to accept all of the bad things that kept cropping up in the writing. I couldn't really decide. And the advantage, I think, of working on a project in this sort of free form way is that you can try out a lot of different realities for your characters before you're really wedded to any of them. And so I kept kind of going back and forth between this story in which really bad things happen, and the story in which more ordinary things happen. But the bad things really kept pushing their way back in. And so I think what was interesting for me about the short story is that I had all of this really formless material. And, you know, in some pages, nothing happens that's terrible. And in other pages, a lot of things happen that's terrible. And I had to kind of slowly sift through all of that to decide like what was the reality for this family. And I decided to try the terrible reality, but not coming at it straight on. So the actual story Flashlight takes place after something bad has happened, and explores kind of the after reverberations of that bad thing, because I just wasn't yet reconciled to representing the bad thing itself, if that makes any sense at all. And you're going to have to remind me of the other question if I didn't already cover it.
I think you covered almost everything that the Beth Hahn class asked for that. And
good.
thank you for for your answer on that. We have a question for all of you, for the three of you together, about writing during the pandemic. When you're working now on the next thing that you're planning, are you considering the need to resist about writing about the pandemic, deliberately avoiding it, ignoring it? If you are avoiding writing about it, is it for a deliberate philosophical reason? Any thoughts that the three of you can have? It, if maybe Katharine wants to go first, and then Leslie, and then Susan again.
Thank you. I'm not sure that for my particular area, which is books for very young children, it isn't. I'm ignoring it completely. The pandemic is not happening in Mouseland. And it's not happening. I have another character who's a fairy, Twinkle the fairy, and it's not happening in the magic forest either, the Sparkle Tree Forest. So that's kind of wonderful for me. I don't need, I can just walk right out of, disappear from the pandemic and go into this other magical world where it's not happening, which is really delightful. And we'd all like to be there, wouldn't we? So.
Yes, and before we leave you, Katharine, I want to make sure we get in the question from the 4-year-old Mairead in Seattle, who has today asked her grandparents, were you a ballerina when you were little?
I was.
And still a ballerina today.
I was quite the ballerina when I was little, and I'm talking about really little and not being particularly graceful. But I loved it. I loved it. I loved dancing around with I was very lucky to grow up with 3 sisters, and we were all very close in age, and we spent our whole childhood dressing up and dancing around the house. My mother was an actress, and she gave us, any scarves or anything she could find. We could dig through her closet. And it was idyllic. So yes, I thought I was a ballerina, let's put it that way. And then the next passion, moved on after that to horses. But as girls do, but I didn't. And then I went to Bennington College and I did modern dance. So you could say I kept dancing, but not. I still love to dance.
We had, before I go to Leslie on the pandemic question, we had one more question for you about, will there be a book, do you think, written by you or someone else about boys who love to dance? Or do you already know of one?
Characters. We have had boy characters in the books who loved it. Angelina's little cousin Henry follows her everywhere and copies her dancing. I love the idea of a boy wanting to dance. And they do, and they're, as we know, boys are marvelous dancers and ballet dancers. And where was I at some book festival with with dancers who told me that, some of the big athletes have to train in ballet because it's one of the best ways to strengthen muscles and to make really strong athletes. So, everybody has this gift. It isn't just for little ballerinas.
Yeah, and for everyone, look up Travis Wall and all of the male dancers who just did an initiative about how, against people who say that boys shouldn't be dancing. Leslie, let's go to you with the pandemic question. Thank you, Katharine.
Yeah, I wrote this in the chat. I think it would be kind of wonderful to see Angelina book in the pandemic. No pressure, but I don't know. I would be so curious what that would look like. I found in the first few months of the pandemic, I would say I had simultaneous and opposite impulses, and one was to write into what was happening, and I, wrote an essay about quarantine and being ill, and I, that felt less like somehow it was pleasurable to be writing about it, and just more that it felt like this. It was what I was. It was where my mind and my heart were. And I usually, actually, when I write personal narrative, it hasn't ever been that kind of turnaround time for me. My friend Katharine has this beautiful way of talking about what it feels like to write about experience with kind of too much immediacy, which is that it's like trying to make the bed while you're still in it. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's hard to write about things when we're still inside of them, especially if you're writing it as nonfiction. But there was something about quarantine, and actually I know not everybody had this reaction, but I really got a lot out of reading other people's writing, and often kind of diaristic, even if still crafted diary writing about quarantine. And maybe it gets to what I was saying earlier about obsession and community, or the ways in which sort of being in a certain kind of extremis together, even if everybody's quarantine was different and there were certain kinds of inequalities that were like magnified rather than elided by quarantine. But there was something about putting writing out with a quicker turnaround that felt appealing to me in early quarantine, in a way that usually a piece of personal narrative might go through several years of revisions and like lots of drafts, and cutting through my own bullshit and delusions like 18 times before the kind of final draft can emerge. So all that said, there was like a vein of my writing that was writing right into the pandemic, and at the same time, the other piece that I was working on during those couple of months was a piece about Donald Judd that was pegged to the Donald Judd retrospective that was up at MoMA, which was itself an eerie thought to think of all those Judd sculptures just sitting in that empty museum for months and months with nobody there with them. There was something kind of spectral and ghostly about that image, but it was about Judd's work and his life as a single father, really, and the relationship between his parenting and his art. But all that to say, it had nothing to do with the pandemic. And I found a lot of relief in that. I had a lot of relief in having one project that could hold the immediacy of experience and simultaneously have this other road I could take on a different direction through the woods that was like not into ballerina land, but into Judd land, which was its own slightly separate flavor of relief.
Thank you, Leslie. That's fascinating. And you guys can all look up those essays later this weekend and read them. Susan, can we go to you on that same question?
Yeah, absolutely. In general, I'm really slow as a writer in terms of absorbing and processing experience and figuring out if I will or won't write about it. I very rarely am able to kind of like write in reaction to something. And usually my fiction is reacting in ways that I can't even really gauge. And so I certainly didn't even dream of I'm still not dreaming of trying to write about what we're experiencing directly, but I do have no doubt that I will. I just don't know when or how. But I did find very early on in the pandemic that the way I was thinking about things was clearly influenced by it. And in fact, the kind of lens that I was turning on to my own, I guess I'd call it slush pile, was suddenly a very focused lens. And this actually comes back to the story Flashlight that was the subject of that earlier question, because I'd mentioned that Flashlight was part of this kind of big pile of material that had been accumulating for a really long time. And, when all of these things first started happening, when the pandemic emerged, lockdowns, and our sort of national and cultural effort to absorb what's going on, which we're still very much struggling with, I couldn't write at all. I actually just couldn't write anything. And but I really was desperate to engage with some form of work, and I started looking at material of mine that I'd never been able to form into any kind of a finished piece. And that's the only reason that story Flashlight exists, because I went and started looking at all of this material, all of this kind of unstructured material that I just hadn't engaged with in a really long time. And I thought, I've just got to, if I can't build anything from scratch, like maybe I can pick up all of these like shards and fragments and scraps lying all over the place and do something with them. And it was incredibly helpful to busy myself in that way. But I also do think that what was happening around me really exercised a major influence on how the story turned out, on the way in which that story did take a turn in the darker direction than it might have.
Susan, we have another question for you from Lauren Akampora, and she would love
That
to
sounds
know.
familiar. Lauren Akampora.
She would really love to know, as a writing teacher, what important lessons about craft do you try to convey to your students? We have a lot of fiction writers in the audience here tonight, and also a lot of memoirists. So maybe if you and Leslie want to answer that, we'll start with Susan and go to Leslie, and then we'll probably have to move on with the rest of the night.
I wanted to say that, hi, Lauren. I'm so happy to be here in virtual space with you. Lauren being one of my very, very, very most brilliant students that I ever had the privilege to teach. And thank you, Lauren, for bringing me here, because Lauren is the way in which I came to be involved with this wonderful organization. I guess what I would say about craft is that with my students, I've tried really hard to do these two very contradictory things, which is, on the one hand, be really rigorous about craft and talk about it in a very, very concrete way in terms of, what do we mean when we say characterization? Like, what are the strategies we use to build characters? What do we mean when we talk about perspective, about choosing that perspective from which the story is going to be told? So I kind of get really like textbooky almost about aspects of craft. And at the same time, I try to inculcate this extremely free-form attitude, which weirdly would seem to contradict. But actually, I think those two opposing impulses in tension with each other are what helped me write. So I almost being scientific about like how craft works, like how do we make dialogue that works, and really kind of dismantling those individual aspects of craft, but at the same time trying to teach my students how to be very generative and non-judgmental about their own work, how to kind of let it all hang out and generate lots and lots of stuff before they start doing that nuts and boltsy work of crafting it. So I guess it's two sides of the process that I try to kind of go at from two different directions, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Susan. And Leslie, anything you can offer our students about craft?
Yeah, I love what Susan just shared, and think that, sometimes one of the ways in which I think about bringing rigor and permission into the same writing process has to do with drafting and revision, and so sometimes I talk to students about like a kind of, and try to talk about it because I need to hear it just as much, kind of letting myself be very free in early stages of a drafting process, because I sort of know and trust or hope that a more rigorous self is going to come in the revision, and that makes it easier to sort of be completely free. A student of mine, to sort of not have to be all the things at once, I guess, or not have to access all the parts of one's writing psyche at the same time, but to sort of be loose and then to tighten the grip, or to be expansive and then to whittle. A student of mine named Hannah, who is wonderful and very bright, and like all of my students, teaches me all the time, has this concept that she calls the risk draft, where often when she's stuck in a piece or feels like it's gone stale in some way, she will create a new document, and it's sort of, that's important to concretely create a new document on the computer that she then labels the risk draft, and just lets herself go wild with it, like completely treats it as like a weird underground lab experiment happening like underneath the basement floor of consciousness, where she like cuts stuff that she feels like should be there but doesn't really want to be there, like writes like weird stuff that feels like it's not related and happened in 1983 but like might be part of the story in a weird crevice of her mind. And and I love that idea of like the risk draft as like creating this protected space where you can just do things that don't make sense but ultimately might of course get you where you need to go in a way that the kind of official version never could.
Good. Thank you so much to all of you. And I'm sure that the students will be upset with me if I don't at least plant the idea in your mind that each of you three should come to teach a one-day class at the center when you have the time. So don't be surprised if you get an email from me asking you, Catherine, Leslie, and Susan to teach a one-day class at some point. Thank you all for your participation tonight. It was really generous of all of you to do this. We're really, really
Inviting us.
grateful.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
Having us.
And now back to Bill Bigelow.
Thank you, Jennifer. Wow. I could listen to those three women till midnight and beyond. That was just brilliant. They're so interesting to get to hear about their process. What a rare treat we've all had. And that, in a nutshell, is what we do here at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I have the unfortunate task in a way now of asking for money about what we do here. We're going to have a little auction. I know you've probably all been in the auction rooms. I hope you've been bidding on the different items. The easiest way is through the link, which we put in the chat room, one.bidpal.net/HVWC, one.bidpal.net/HVWC. And so we're going to start with anyone who's so kind and generous that would give to our two main funds that we mentioned earlier, just in review, our capital campaign, which is of course about this wonderful, beautiful building where so many brilliant things are done. I'm fortunate to be able to teach a workshop here pre-pandemic, and it is the most nurturing environment with the Hudson rolling by and the wood and the stone fireplace. So our capital campaign is important, and our scholarship fund for persons of color, which we talked about earlier. You know, we hear a lot these days about Black Lives Matter, and do they ever? We also like to remind everyone Black voices matter too. And we're here to hear them and to engage them and to learn from them. It's important to note we have the incredible opportunity tonight through the generosity of Arts Westchester and our county government to match any gifts to the center that are new. So anyone who's not donated before, that's what we mean by new, or exceed those gifts that you may have given in previous years. So if you've given 1,000, you want to give 1,500 this year, Arts Westchester, the county government, will match that. So that's a lucky thing we've got. Here's how it all works. We are raising money now at suggested levels for either the Persons of Color Scholarship Fund or the Capital Campaign. Simply put your name in the chat with the fund you'd like to direct your donation to and the dollar amount you intend to give. For example, I could put Bill Bigelow, $1,000 POC, Persons of Color. Placing your name and amount will be considered a pledge in this virtual paddle raise of sorts. We will contact you by email after tonight to arrange payment. So, you know, funnily enough, last year when I did this, I just screamed out that we needed money, and we started at $5,000, and 4 wonderful, miraculous people raised their paddles and each gave us $5,000. So I'm not going to mess with anything that works so well. So I'm going to ask anyone who'd like to, who's wonderful and generous enough to help us with these causes. We'd love to get $5,000 from someone like we did last year. So I think it's pretty straightforward where you go to do that. You'll be able to find it. You know, it's all pretty straightforward. We've already gotten some great donations in an amount of $1,000 or higher. I'm going to call out a few names just in a way of thanks. Paula Restuccia, Lynn Kaiser, Robert Brown, and Angelina Mack. They've given over $1,000. And of course, our board members who generously bought tables and crowdsourced funding for this evening, also ensuring so many could join us tonight who might not otherwise be able to. So if anyone can jump in there, you know, we're here in the chat to look if anyone has any questions. Just a small donation, a large donation. There's some wonderful auction items. I know I went in and saw earlier, there's some fantastic, really good wine. There are courses with personal trainers. Someone's giving a voice lesson. I don't know if that's to learn how to speak better or to learn how to fa la 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 sing. There's all sorts of things in our auction that you can go in and find and, you know, just assign your hard-earned dollars to, so it will help our capital campaign to keep our beautiful building going and the Persons of Color Scholarship. So we're waiting for anyone who's feeling generous, kind, and giving in this very difficult time. You know, the arts organizations like a lot of places, but in particular, arts organizations have been hit very hard by the pandemic. So we appreciate and look forward to whatever kind of support you can give us in monetary amounts, whatever it is. Just go into the chat. You'll see where you go. I think it's pretty straightforward. Also, we do have a text number. This is 914-600-3736. 914-600-3736. You just text GIVE. You have to be a little patient because it takes a while for it to catch up. I knew earlier some people were struggling with it. But if you go to that number, 914-600-3736, type the word GIVE, G-I-V-E, and then you'll be prompted to be able to make a donation that way. Also, I might add parenthetically, during the week, Monday, Tuesday, Christina will be here. If people prefer to avoid the technology and jump in that way, you can do that too. Make a phone call.
21 people.
So I can't really see the numbers that I'm sure are flooding into the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I have great faith in all of our supporters, but I'm sure millions of dollars are coming in. And this enables us to hear things like what we heard tonight from those wonderful women authors. My God, I'm so blown away. I can't get past that. As I said, I'd listen to them till 1 in the morning. All the aspiring writers out there, what a treat to hear about these wonderful writers' process and their approach and how they think about things, especially people as celebrated, as Susan Choi saying, she was stuck. I always tell my students that it's okay to be stuck. So please give some money that you can. We will appreciate whatever you can give. It's how we keep going. It's how we keep being able to do these wonderful, inspiring, moving events. So anyone who's out there that's still ready to give and text, what? I think I heard something about Margot. Is Margot in there? Jennifer's nodding. Am I looking for Margot, Jennifer? I see you nodding, but I think you're muted. So are we going to Margot now? Margot, you genius. Where Margot, the poet, where is she? There's so many people up here. I'm sure everyone's terribly busy texting us money and going into the chat room to look for places where they can buy different things, reduced prices, of course. Anything you can give for our capital campaign and our scholarship fund for persons of color in this era, in this time, what could be more important? We're thrilled to be able to do that, to hear the new voices. I know when I started as a writer, you need a mentor. You need people to listen. It's not just about putting your words out there. You need someone to listen. And what we all do here at the Writers Center, and I think this is an example tonight, is we listen avidly. And we try our darndest to help do a little guidance. But mostly we're here, as is our scholarship fund, to listen and to encourage creativity. So I hope you're all finding a way into the chat where you can give a little, one.bidpal.net/HVWC. And any amount is greatly appreciated. Again, if you're a first-time donor, that amount will be matched by Arts Westchester and our county government. And if you donated before, if you give a little more this time, that also will be matched. So we look forward to the money flood that we hope and expect you can help us with. I know that in years past, we've had a wonderful event, Chilean sea bass and pureed artichoke hearts. It's a little different this year. It's hard for us to all get our arms around it, but we need the money that you so generously have given us in the past just as much as ever. So I think Christina and Krista are probably in the office tallying everything up. And here comes a note. Okay, I want to thank Rachel, Eric, Margot, Angelina, and many, many more. So I think that's probably the end of our fabulous auction. Is it the end of our fabulous auction? Can't wait to see the tally. So we're going to go to a video. So a video is next. Thank you again for coming and for your generosity. It's greatly appreciated.
Toi Derricotte is the author of I, New and Selected Poems from University of Pittsburgh Press 2019, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. The Undertaker's Daughter and 4 earlier collections of poetry, including Tender, winner of the 1998 Patterson Poetry Prize. Her honors include the 2012 Patterson Poetry Prize for Sustained Literary Achievement, the 2012 PEN/Volkner Award for Poetry, the Lucille Medwick Memorial Award from the Poetry Society of America, 3 Pushcart Prizes, and the Distinguished Pioneering of the Arts Award from the United Black Artists. Professor Emerita at the University of Pittsburgh, Derricotte co-founded Cave Canem Foundation with Cornelius Eady, served on the Academy of American Poets Board of Chancellors from 2012 to 2017, and currently serves on Cave Canem's Board of Directors. Slappering Hall Press published Toi Derricotte and Don Lundy Martin's conversation chapbook, Every Bruise is a Figure of Remembrance, in March 2020. And everyone here tonight will receive that gorgeous collection, beautifully designed by Ed Rayer of Swamp Press. Most recently, Toi Derricotte received the Frost Medal from the Poetry Society of America for Distinguished Lifetime Achievement in Poetry. Previous winners include Marianne Moore, Gwendolyn Brooks, Allen Ginsberg, Adrienne Rich, Lucille Clifton, Marilyn Nelson, and Susan Howe. The Frost Medal citation from the Poetry Society of America's Board of Governors in 2020 reads, quote, "There are few poets who are as brave as Toi Derricotte, brave in her subject matter and brave in how she insists that even the deepest hurts must sing on the page. Derricotte's New and Selected is an amazing statement of her dedication to craft, vision, and invention, which she has built book by book through her writing life. Her work dives into the interior of African American womanhood and brings back such lyric beauty. Her poems have given vast permission to the poets who have followed her to tell the truth of their lives, and in doing that, have allowed all of us a chance to rediscover the world. Please help me welcome Toi Derricotte to the gala tonight. Thank you so much, Toi, for being here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here to celebrate the Hudson Valley Writers Center and Slappering Hole Press on the occasion of this marvelous gala. Though we're not able to be together to lift a glass of champagne, this evening has given me the energy to change out of my sweatpants, put on a nice scarf, and so for that I'm entirely grateful. I hope you're feeling the vibes. It's an honor to read with Jericho, Susan, Katharine, and Leslie. I'm sending out warm regards to Jennifer Franklin, who worked so hard with Don Lundy Martin and me in putting together the chapbook. A Bruise is a Figure of Remembrance. Beautiful chapbook. At a time when grief is so overwhelming for me, for so many artists, when it's so hard to write, it put the pressure on us and gave us a reason. So I hope you'll check it out and perhaps make a purchase. I'm going to read 5 poems, 2 from the chapbook by Dawn and me, and 3 new ones. Why I don't write about George Floyd. Because there is too much to say, because I have nothing to say, because I don't know what to say, because everything has been said, because it hurts too much to say. What can I say? What can I say? Something is stuck in my throat. Something is stuck like an apple. Something is stuck like a knife. Something is stuffed like a foot. Something is stuffed like a body. These next two are from the chapbook. A bruise is a figure of remembrance. This poem has gone through 100 revisions because it has all these separate parts, and I don't know. So I hope it works. Name, Toi Webster, sex, FE, number of months of pregnancy, 9. Is mother married? Yes. DOB 41241, County Wayne, State Michigan, Village or City Hamtramck. Name of hospital, St. Francis. Father, Benjamin Webster. Color, B1. Age at time of this birth, 29. Birthplace, Franklin, Kentucky. Occupation, mortician. Mother, full maiden name, Antonia Baquet. Color, B1. Age at time of this birth, 24. Birthplace, Beaumont, Texas. Occupation, housewife. Does B1 mean black one? Did someone type B10 for the color of some other parents? What's the difference? Who decided my parents' color? The black doctor who delivered me or the white nurse who typed the form? I was the first black baby born in an all-white Catholic hospital in Hamtramck, Michigan, a Polish village in the middle of Detroit. What was my mother's labor like? How did the white nurses respond to the cries of the first black woman in the maternity ward? Did they come in and say the usual kind words, but with a little crimp in the throat? All my mother remembered was the pain. Things got blurry during the middle passage. So much before and after was lost. There was so much to forget. After my husband's birth, my mother-in-law's doctor explained that he didn't give her drugs because black women were like horses. They didn't feel pain. Maybe she was a B2. My mother was a B1. She got so many drugs that she sat up on the table laughing hysterically. She had to be calmed down like a horse. She had to be put in a dark room with a heavy blanket over her. At birth, the skin and eyes are lighter. You'd need a chart on the wall to measure gradations to hold the skin up to. Perhaps B1 indicates straight light hair, ghost white skin, and blue eyes. Perhaps B2 indicates straight hair, cream skin, and blue eyes. Perhaps B3 indicates soft curls, antique white skin, and light brown or smoky irises. Perhaps B4 indicates wavy hair, seashell skin, brown or dark blue-black irises. Perhaps B5, wavier hair, touch of the tar brush nose, brown or blue-black irises, all the way down to B10, tight as a corkscrew curls, a no doubt about it, sir, wide nose and skin as black as outer space. A nurse from South Carolina told me there was a chart that said, if in doubt, check the size of the baby's genitals. Dear person of authority, please indicate on this line this baby's degree of worthiness to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Dear God, dear parents, dear anybody. Heard on the auction block. If I'm going to be sold, I'd rather be sold as a B1. 2, I was disappointed that I didn't bring a higher price. Who assigns you value? Who whispers in your ear? My mother said, When they first handed me to her, she whispered in my ear, "I will never be alone again." She needed company to accompany her through the conflagration. She had been 18, alone, a B1 in 1933 in Louisiana when her mother died. She needed an angel, a powerful one, Mary or God, to be with her when it happened. 1. When she found her mother dead at 43 scrubbing a white woman's floor. 2. When she was raped as a child, which she would never open her mouth about, but I believe happened because of the way she treated our bodies, like raging secrets. 3. On her way to school, when she was beaten up on the white side of town for being a little stuck-up yellow nigger, and then beaten up when she crossed over the line to the black part for the same thing. 4. On the train, would she sit in the white or black section? 5. Did the white real estate dealer think of her as B1? What if B1s and B10s are the same to a real estate dealer? She was so afraid that the possibilities would be taken away, possibilities that had been given back reluctantly, like owning your own body or a nice house. It made her skittery. My mother must have been thinking of her body every week when she scrubbed on her hands and knees inside the corners of the bathroom and under the toilet. Pee stains are a telltale sign, with that little angel over her head circling like a fruit fly. I don't want to die with my bed unmade. I don't want the white people in my building to find me dead and whisper among themselves that all along I was the B10 they suspected. Does being a B1 make you more paranoid? If some babies have a birth certificate with just a letter and no number, if after color it just says W, how does that little difference change the self that emerges from the cocoon like a butterfly? I am a poet. I am the co-founder of a successful organization. I am an old woman getting ready to die. I am in good shape for my age. I've worked hard all my life, like my mother did, like my grandmother. I've accomplished something. You can see what I've done. My mother used to stand at the door after the floor was polished. She'd look at the placement of the chairs, tables, of the cut glass ashtrays, at the bisque figurines, and, if necessary, go back and adjust things slightly. And this is the second poem from the chapbook. Entering the universe. The universe is deep. Sometimes you can feel yourself entering. Sometimes you are almost there. Its thickness and texture not ephemeral, but right in the center of your view. You are almost real, and it is almost real, like living mirrors. You feel it deepen the way when you were a child, you went behind a mirror expecting to see another person. There is a flatness. You go from surface to surface, layer after layer, like paintings on top of other paintings. But sometimes, for example, tonight at twilight, when the car lights are coming on, the soft silver brightness, each and each, as if they are separate souls, reminds you of lights you cannot see, something in and under the air, something like a greater soul that makes each thing immeasurably precious, a depthless thing, everything going on forever, and a part of you almost entering. You remember when you were a child, you shut your heart like a tomb, a coldness gathered between your soul ribs. Your soul struggled behind it, as if it were behind a door, muffled then silent. So you were born into a motherless world, a world without touch. Your soul shriveled as your body ate, yet here you stand today, a visitor at the entrance of her own being. Hoping, but not certain, grasping everything is wonder. You feel the silence between the beats of your heart and you hold yourself there like some great dancer walking up a wall. And two more shorter poems. American Kindness. From the graciousness of my forebears commenced American kindness. Today I felt it twice. A black woman at Robert's Market, as old as I am, left her cashier's post and went all the way back to the muffaletta maker to ask if I was supposed to have some kind of sauce, maybe mayo or ketchup, on my sandwich. She didn't have to, but seeing I was confused and opening the dry bread with her fingers, she took action. Later, a thoughtful black woman came out of the ice cream parlor I visited to ask, "Is this your can of LaCroix coconut water?" I was easy to spot with my cane and ice cream dripping down my hand, but she could have thrown the can out. Sure, at Office Max, a white woman handed me a 10% coupon, and sure, a white man sitting at the metal table in the parking lot moved down so I could sit. But think of the numbers of times a slave in charge of a sweltering kitchen picked up her knife and went out to cut off the head of a chicken. And this last one, The Great Beauty. The movie The Great Beauty was one of my favorites. It won the Academy Awards. I think it was in 2016, an Italian movie, The Great Beauty. In the movie, flamingos migrate over Rome and rest overnight on the terrace of Gambardella, so that in the rose light of dawn, he walks out to find his saintly old guest, Sister Maria, meditating among a flamboyance. 100 stand on pink stilt-like legs with roseate plumes and beaks sturdy as lobster crackers. Some rest on one leg or sit with legs tucked under them. Some half-heartedly peck at stone as if they might find breadcrumbs from last night's party. But all are quiet. I know all their Christian names, she brags under her breath to no one, or perhaps to God. I never received such tidings from the universe, but Saturday on my walk, checking my Fitbit again, 3,000 for an old lady is good, I heard wing beats and cooing, and then almost under my arm, one flew up, nearly brushing my hand, as if intentional, then 20, 30 coming from behind, as if they were pouring out of my back. I couldn't tell how many would arrive, 100 resting on the branches of a tree, and some flying up to the balustrade, sitting in a long row stolid as judges. Why can't I take evidence seriously? I, who half believe in God, spoke playfully, not even remembering I had watched Sister Maria's flamingos 2 nights before. What are you doing here? As if they were old friends or a bunch of my kids showing up out of nowhere. I watched for a while, and when they just sat there, turning their heads, I went on with my walk. Another 1,500 steps to go. By the time I was almost home, I had convinced myself it was only pigeons, perhaps hungry. But then they came back, from all around, as if they were rising up out of the ground, as if they were being made right before me. All the sounding wings, air whipping and breaking, their gray and pink presences, as if convincing me. Thank you so much.
Jericho Brown is the recipient of a Writing Writers Award and fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Brown's first book, Please, won the American Book Award. His second book, The New Testament, won the Ainsfield Wolf Book Award and was named one of the best of the year by the Library Journal. Cold Front, and the Academy of American Poets. He is also the author of the collection, The Tradition, which was published by Copper Canyon in 2019. It was a finalist for the 2019 National Book Award and the winner of the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. His poems have appeared in BuzzFeed, The Nation, The New York Times, The New Yorker, The New Republic, Time, and the Pushcart Prize anthology, as well as several volumes of the best American poetry. He's an associate professor and the director of the creative writing program at Emory University in Atlanta. I recently had the honor of taking a masterclass with Jericho on Zoom for the Emily Dickinson Museum's annual Tell It Slant Festival, and then to hear him alternate between reading Dickinson poems and his own. I don't think it's hyperbole to say it was a life-changing experience. I am so happy for all of you that you get to hear Jericho Brown read from his Pulitzer Prize-winning collection, thanks to my student, Barb Fulton Jennings, Poet Laureate of Ridgefield, Connecticut, for helping to make this reading possible tonight. Please, all of you, help me welcome the amazing Jericho Brown.
I'm going to read you some sonnets, and it takes me somewhere around a minute to read a sonnet, so I'll read 12. So I'm taking maybe 13 minutes of your time. I think I'll be able to read every sonnet I've ever written. Duplex. A poem is a gesture toward home. It makes dark demands I call my own. Memory makes demands darker than my own. My last love drove a burgundy car. My first love drove a burgundy car. He was fast and awful, tall as my father. Steadfast and awful, my tall father hit hard as a hailstorm. He'd leave marks. Light rain hits easy, but leaves its own mark, like the sound of a mother weeping again. Like the sound of my mother weeping again. No sound beating ends where it began. None of the beaten end up how we began. A poem is a gesture toward home. The card tables. Stop playing. You do remember the card tables, slick stick figures like men with low-cut fades, short but standing straight because we bent them into weak display. What didn't we want? What wouldn't we claim? How perfectly each surface was made for throwing or dropping or slamming a necessary portion of our pay. And how could any of us get by with one in the way? Didn't that bare square ask to be played on, beaten in the head, then folded, then put away? Also, we could call ourselves safe now that there was more room, a little more space. The tradition. Aster, nasturtium, delphinium. We thought fingers in dirt meant it was our dirt, learning names in heat, in elements classical philosophers said could change us. Stargazer, foxglove. Summer seemed to bloom against the will of the sun, which news reports claimed flamed hotter on this planet than when our dead fathers wiped sweat from their necks. Cosmos, baby's breath. Men like me and my brothers filmed what we planted for proof we existed before too late. Sped the video to see blossoms brought in seconds. Colors you expect in poems where the world ends. Everything cut down. John Crawford, Eric Garner, Mike Brown. The water lilies. They open in the day and close at night. They are good at it, at appearances. They are white. I judge them. Judge the study they make of themselves, aspirational beings, fake if you ask me. If you ask me, I'll say no, thank you. I don't need to watch what goes, only imagining itself seen. Don't need to see them yawn their thin mouths and feed on light, absolute and unmoved. They remind me of Black people who see the movie about slaves and exit, saying how they would have fought to whip Legree with his own whip and walked away from the plantation, their eyes raised to the sun without going blind. Duplex. The opposite of rape is understanding. A field of flowers called paintbrushes. A field of flowers called paintbrushes, though the spring be less than actual. Though the spring be less than actual, men roam shirtless as if none ever hurt me. Men roam that myth. In truth, one hurt me. I want to obliterate the flowered field, to obliterate my need for the field and raise a building above the grasses, a building of prayer against the grasses. My body a temple in disrepair. My body is a temple in disrepair. The opposite of rape is understanding. Duplex. I begin with love, hoping to end there. I don't want to leave a messy corpse. I don't want to leave a messy corpse full of medicines that turn in the sun. Some of my medicines turn in the sun. Some of us don't need hell to be good. Those who need most need hell to be good. What are the symptoms of your sickness? Here is one symptom of my sickness. Men who love me are men who miss me. Men who leave me are men who miss me in the dream where I am an island. In the dream where I am an island, I grow green with hope. I'd like to end there. This poem is in two parts. There's a sestet and then an octave is the second part of the poem. Eden. One winter we decided to plunge, to swim or drown, bare-dicked and beautiful. Then we slept as if the town were warm. Though before either of us got born, heroes thought to end all threats by building one final weapon. We said what any man should when waking cold, his lover pressed against him close. Promise, and I could die this way. Let's celebrate, O ye gentlemen of Thunder Bay. Show me a brick, a bottle, knuckles and feet. Put a pair of Nikes made for catching prey. Don't just scare me. Find your keys and beat the limp out my wrists. I worked all Friday, and this is North America, for God's sake. Treat me like it, like I looked at you that able way you look at women to prove yourselves straight. A young man. We stand together on our block, me and my son, neighbors saying our face is the same, but I know he's better than me. When other children move toward my daughter, he lurches like a brother meant to put them down. He is a bodyguard on the playground. He won't turn apart from her, empties any enemy, leaves them flimsy. Me, confounded, I never fought for so much. I calmed my daughter when I could cradle my daughter. My son swaggers about her. He won't have to heal a girl he won't let free. They are so small, and I still am a young man. In him lives my black anger made red. They play. He is not yet incarcerated. Track 8, a song for you. Bread or lightning, his hand opens like the hand of God above me. His neighbors next door turn up their stereo to drown our sounds. They must get tired of him putting me out every 10 days. It's the missing money or the man he caught me kissing. And it doesn't matter. I don't love him. But I do love this song, every version of it. I never knew Natalie Cole recorded one, high and helpless as the clouds her son reached for when she watched the boy drowning. Hit me with some Natalie Cole or some Donny Hathaway in his heaven of screams before he crashed into concrete. Or all 20 temptations, the arthritic and diabetic, the cancerous and violent. I refuse to choose. Nothing hurts like old R&B. God bless the couple next door. They muffle our misery. They must sleep close on nights this cold. A woman with her man's fat hands all to herself. I pray she never has a son. Duplex. Don't accuse me of sleeping with your man when I didn't know you had a man. Back when I didn't know you had a man, the moon glowed above the city's blackout. I walked home by moonlight through the blackout. I was too young to be reasonable. He was so young, so unreasonable. He dipped weed in embalming fluid. He'd dip our weed in embalming fluid. We'd make love on trains and in dressing rooms, love in the subway, love in mall restrooms, a bore at home. He transformed in the city. What's yours at home is a wolf in my city. You can't accuse me of sleeping with a man. Psalm 150. Some folks fool themselves into believing, but I know what I know once at the height of hopeless touching. My man and I hold our breaths, certain we can stop time or maybe eliminate it from our lives, which are shorter since we learned to make love for each other rather than doing it to each other. As for praise and worship, I prefer the latter. Only memory makes us kneel, silent and still. Hear me? Thunder scares. Lightning lets us see. Then, heads covered, we wait for rain. Dear Lord, let me watch for his arrival and hang my head and shake it like a man who's lost and lived. Something keeps trying, but I'm not killed yet. Duplex, Cento. My last love drove a burgundy car, color of a rash, a symptom of sickness. We were the symptoms, the road, our sickness. None of our fights ended where they began. None of the beaten end where they begin. Any man in love can cause a messy corpse, but I didn't want to leave a messy corpse obliterated in some lilied field, stench obliterating lilies of the field, the murderer, young and unreasonable. He was so young, so unreasonable, steadfast and awful, tall as my father. Steadfast and awful, my tall father was my first love. He drove a burgundy car. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Toi. Thank you so much, Jericho. That was incredible. We're going to take some questions now. We got a few already from the audience. Paula Colangelo would love to know how Jericho invented a new form, the duplex. Can you talk for a moment about your form and how it came to him, your process?
Yeah, I can talk about that. Thank you so much for having me, and I've really enjoyed being here. I should say, before I answer this question, it's a particular pleasure to read with Toi, who's one of the biggest influence for my poems that I know personally, and who is one of the few contemporary American poets who I can say, when she has a book come out, I'm first in line. I'm always on the pre-order line, and I don't think I would be able to have any poems at all if it weren't for Toi Derricotte. And I mean that not just through her poetry, but also through her activism. Because of what Toi did in American history, people like me are able to exist in the way that we can exist. And so I thank God for her every day. When I was working on this book, I realized I was writing a lot of sonnets. And something came to me that felt like, because I had written so many sonnets, I thought to myself, oh, maybe that means I should write a crown. And I almost immediately resisted that as soon as I said it to myself, because I didn't want to, I don't want to always do the first thought. I don't want to always do the easy thing. I had for a very long time been thinking about, like all of us, everybody in here has been thinking about these things, about crowns and about the history of sonnets and about the love-hate relationship that any writer would have with a sonnet, particularly for poets. It is indeed the imperial form, right? You say sonnet to somebody who's never read a poem, but they know that a sonnet is a poem. And there's something about it where we feel, reading it and writing it, we have this sense that it is the achievement in poetry. And at the same time, particularly for me and for many people who the English language hasn't been so good to, we sort of deny and push that feeling away. Why is that the achievement? And who told me it was? And they don't call it the Elizabethan sonnet for nothing, and they don't call that a crown for nothing. So I was thinking about how do I make this crown and yet push away the fact of crownishness. So I decided that what I would do, because the dynamic moment of the crown is the repeated line, I decided I would write a poem only using the repeated lines of the crown. And then once I realized I was going to do that, I said, well, if I were to do that, I would just have a bunch of huzzles. And I said, oh, I've written huzzles. I can do that anytime. So I had this idea that I would write a poem, create a form that was like me, that I'm often in the world, actually pretty daily. It's always lovely hearing Toi read these poems. Tonight, I'm often encountering a case of mistaken identity. People don't imagine that I could be who I am because of what they see. And so I wanted to write a poem that was at once Black, queer, and Southern. And so I thought the way to do that was to make a form that was at once a huzzle, a sonnet, and a blues poem. And I realized that the blues, that I would have the huzzle element, that I would have the sonnet element, particularly also through syllabics, that one way of marrying that sonnet element was that I would do syllabics rather than meter, marrying east to west. So I wanted to create all of these identities in a single space, and I thought that the blues is what would animate that. So that's how it was created. I should also say that no duplex started with its own lines. I didn't write them from top to bottom. The oldest lines for the duplex are as old as 1999, which was probably around the same time that I met Toi Derricotte. So.
Oh, Wow, what a great answer, Jericho. Thank you so much. And thank you, Toi. Toi, we have a question for you from Kathleen Williamson. She was so moved to see your poem in the New Yorker this week, talking about her favorite movie, The Great Beauty. Can you talk about how art, including film, influences you and your poetry?
Well, you know, my writing has changed over the years so much. It seems like recently I'm more available to anything that I experience. It feels like at this time in my life, and with the kind of work I've done with form and you know, trying to find what's right for me. I think it's so wonderful what Jericho's doing with form, and what a lot of the young writers now are doing with form, you know, sort of playing around with it and you know, doing all kinds of dramatic and very, I think, sonically adding this kind of sonic interest to traditional forms that, you know, it just breaks me up. It's so wonderful. So I think for me now, I find a kind of unity with whatever that voice is inside me that is poetry and that I hear as poetry, which is new for me. It's always been there, but that voice hasn't been so clear for me in the past. Now it's very clear for me. And also because of all the work I've done with every book, if you'll notice in the in I, which is the collection of poems, you'll see that every book, the poems look different. And I think for every book, I've really struggled with what to do with the particular information and experience that I tried to communicate in each book. My prose book, The Black Notebooks, was written once all the way through as iambic pentameter. And I decided before I published it that since I was calling it a notebook, I wanted it to look as if it was just a diary writing. And I felt that, you know, using those formal lines would make people so aware of the formality. And so many times people would say to me of this book that, you know, took me 25 years to write, oh, you know, I loved reading your diary, you know. But, you know, form is all about what you want to do with what you want to say. And it has to do with how to really get your point across. And so for me now, as I say, this voice, I hear it and I can go right to the page. And I would love to do some experiments with some of the things forms Jericho is working on. That would be interesting to me. But it's also wonderful for me to be able to know what to do with a line now that really is my own line, and for me to feel very natural about letting language form itself on the paper. So I don't know if that answers it, but that's why I pay attention to the voice, which is sort of like those pigeons. You know, something just comes up and you pay attention. A lot of times we don't pay attention to the voice, the small voice, right? So yeah, that's where that comes from.
Thank you so much for that great answer, Toi, and for your reading. We have a great question from Fred Marchant in the audience tonight. wonderful Grey Wolf poet and one of our teachers at the center. He wants to know from both of you, do you retain a sense of hope for the future of our society? And if so, how important is that sense of hope? If it is important, could you give us an outline of what you hope for and what your sense of hope is based on? And what maybe a few words on what writers can do to foster meaningful and realistic hope within our society, especially right now.
Fred only asks hard questions. He's literally asking us, do you think the apocalypse will end? Or is the apocalypse a 1-year apocalypse or a 20-year apocalypse?
You know, Jericho, I have a very short answer, so maybe I should answer first.
Oh, please. Yeah, sure, Toi.
Never forget that the slaves survived slavery.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that something?
Never forget that Black people survived the Middle Passage. 12 to 14 million Black people came over from Africa, packed in the bottom of boats, in chains and coffles, away from their home, not in their own communities. They were separated and people didn't speak the same language. And they were sent to, South America, the Caribbean. The United States was actually the longest voyage. They were in those boats for months sometimes. So many died. I think out of the 14 million, over 2 million died in the voyage. And then they had to start all over again, everything. And I'm thinking of Congo Square, right, in New Orleans, where Black people who didn't speak the same language in the early 1700s, I think maybe even the late 1600s, would gather and dance because, the French Catholics were a little bit more lax and let the slaves have Sunday to meet and congregate. And so that's where music, and they communicated with music because they couldn't speak the same language. And so they drummed and they danced and they sang and they recognized each other. So when I feel hopeless, I think of that strength and that determination.
Yeah.
And I have some hope.
Yeah. My good friend, the writer, Bettina Judd, and I, whenever we're down, we have a pledge that one will call the other. And as soon as the other hears that we're down, we tell each other, whatever we're going through now is not as bad as it was. Not even just for the lives of our people, but for our own personal lives. The things that I get frustrated about now is nothing like when I would come home. When I was a kid, I would come home and sometimes the lights would be on and sometimes they wouldn't. And somehow I have managed always to have lights. I have not come home to a house where I could not afford to pay the light bill. And so I'm grateful for that. I think it's also important to remember that improvisation is a result of being uncomfortable. We are asked to improvise. Black people, our contribution to this nation has to do with improvisation. That's why our music sounds like it does. That's why jazz exists. That's why our food tastes like it does. And that's why there is a soul food. And that improvisation will help us the more we learn to do it, if we can continue to get uncomfortable. If we only allow others to make us uncomfortable, then we're not improvising, we're just being uncomfortable. But can we, in that uncomfortable moment, turn the uncomfortable into something else? And so we ourselves have to sort of go toward that which is uncomfortable. It's the reason why we say what we say about integrity. It's about being who you are, no matter who the audience is. Being who you are, no matter who the audience is, means you might be uncomfortable, but you have to keep looking for new audiences anyway. So. That's a great answer, Toi.
Yeah, thank you both for your answers. And Fred is thanking you in the chat for answering that question of his at length. So we have a lot of poetry students in the audience here tonight, a lot of writers. Do you think you could just speak for a moment, each of you, about craft and process and what you think might be most helpful to emerging poets? I know you're both mentors for emerging poets.
I'll just say that nothing we're good at doing, anything we do well, we did not do well the first time we tried to do it. The only reason we do it well now is because we kept trying. If you don't believe me, think about that dish that you cook better than anybody else, and think about what happened the first time you tried to make it. If you don't believe me, think about how easy you just get behind the wheel of a car and go from one place to another, and think about what happened the first time you tried to drive a car. And so your relationship to your craft has to be a relationship that is like that, where you just keep trying until you get better at it. So that's one piece of advice I have. And the other piece is simply never to throw anything away. There is no such thing as a failed poem. Every poem you write that fails means you have a good line. You have not written an entire poem that has failed without writing a good line. If you write 10 failed poems, that means you've got 10 good lines. Take all 10 lines out, put them on a different Microsoft Word document, and make another poem out of those lines put together.
That's a really good answer. You know, I'm thinking of a fourth grader, what they said about, I had been teaching the fourth grade for several days in the Poets in the School program. And, you know, they were writing, doing all kinds of writing. And I didn't tell them they were writing poems, you know, and then at the end, we talked about writing poems. So then I said, okay, so now we've been writing 4 days. What is a poem? And this one kid raised his hand. He said, Toi, he said, I don't know what a poem is, but it makes you shut up. I can't think of a better answer for what is a poem. And to me, you know, craft is just something that you just try all kinds of ways. You're not only looking for an external thing, for me, you're looking for a way your internal sense sort of matches that external sense. And then you're trying to find a way that those things match. And you can also sort of see it from how it's seen from outside. So to me, there's a lot of trying to match up and figure out what's out there and what's in here. And sometimes, you know, I would write a poem, the same poem, I'd write it over 50 times, changing one word or one period or one comma or moving a line around. You know, every word, every period, every comma, every line break, you know, is part of a whole delivery, a whole package, you know. So, and the other thing I would say about craft is I think you need somebody that you trust to share your work with. I do think that if you can share your work with somebody else whose work you trust, who you respect, and you two can talk about what you're reading in each other's work. Because a lot of times you're so into your own mind that you don't see that somebody else is not in your mind, and they need certain facts in order to understand what you're trying to convey. So those two things, I think. Really helpful to all the students. Thank you. We have another question, and I know it's getting late, so this will be our last question. And then you can go to your breakout rooms if you'd like to be with your guests again. Question for Jericho.
How do you leave your mark on the traditional forms and structures you inherited? From Garfield Charles. He wants to know, do they constrict you or do they set your voice free?
For me, the wonderful thing about writing in form is that it puts you in a position where you don't know what you're going to say next, which for me has always been the purpose of writing poetry. I want to write the poems that tap into my unconscious, my subconscious mind. And that means I don't sit down to write with an intention that I'm going to say something. I write trying to figure out what it is that I didn't know I already knew, as Adrienne Rich would say, right? I'm trying to figure out something, some piece of truth. I'm trying to figure out what I really believe. I know what I tell myself I believe, but then there are all these things in writing poems that I find out, oh, that's what I really think, When you write a word or a poem like Yellow, this is actually a bad example, but y'all have to deal. If you're writing a rhyming poem, a formal poem, and you have a word like yellow at the end of a line, when it's time to make that rhyme again and you can't think of another word other than mellow, then you suddenly are in a position where you have to use a word that you otherwise would not ever use. I don't say the word mellow, but that means I'm going to say something I did not expect to say in that entire line. And that for me is the joy of writing poetry: interrogation, investigation, and discovery. And I think if you're actually doing that, the mark will be made, because when you tell your particular truth, nobody else has a truth as particular. That doesn't make my truth less true or your truth less true. It just means that's your particular truth. And so I think making a mark on something is automatic because only you will do it.
Thank you. Toi, do you want to answer that? Do you have anything to add to that question?
No, I thought it was beautifully done. I love the idea of, finding, I think in every poem, you have to find what you weren't looking for. They say if you know the last line of the poem, it's not a poem, it's something else. So for me, that discovery of finding what you didn't know would happen is what a poem is all about.
Thank you all for your contributions. Your readings were amazing. This is a night we're never going to forget. We really appreciate. And, Toi will be back here reading with Dawn Lundy Martin from her amazing chapbook, with Lyra Van Cleef Stefanon and with Leela Chantrell on Sunday, November 8th. So at 4:00, it's on our website. So please, if you loved hearing Toi tonight, please hear more of her on November 8th. And of course, Jericho's work, you all know, and please support them, buy their books. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Thank you to Krista and Christina for all of your incredible hard work tonight. Thank you for everyone on the board, all of the SHP Advisory Committee members, Margot Taft-Stever, of course. Just like Don, we wouldn't be here if Don weren't here. We wouldn't be here without Margot, incredible poet, editor, and founder of the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Thank you to Mary Linder for all of the work you've been doing tirelessly for the entire time we've been working in the pandemic. And thank you to all of you for being here. We really appreciate it. You can all go see your friends in the breakout room. Toi and Jericho, thank you. We will not forget your words.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you. Loved it.
Love you, Toi.
Love you, Jericho.
Love you forever,
Big hug.
Big hug. Big virtual hug. Afa's out there. I saw him out there.
Oh,
love you, elder brother Afa. See y'all later.
Yeah, and don't forget to read all of the compliments to you guys in the chat. Loving you.
I loved seeing the faces, all of you guys. I feel like I know you all now. I've been perusing up and down, and so I'll miss you guys. Bye.
I'm going to give us a quick send-off here, everyone. I'd like to just remind everyone to consider supporting the publishing industry, independent booksellers, and our authors by buying their books. The links to their latest titles are in the chat. What a wonderful night. Again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our authors who painted a great picture of what the Writers' Center is all about. I realize it's been a long literary night, but for those who are sitting at virtual tables, if you'd like to rejoin your friends, please just click on Breakout. You'll be returned to your private room. On behalf of all of us at the Writers' Center, many thanks for joining us tonight. Stay well. We hope to see you at the Writers' Center in person very soon. Thank you.